Welcome to another OCD. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the tweet that I put out a moment ago. Where I was saying that if you try your whole life to disprove the thing that you're scared of with OCD, you could spend your whole lifetime and never get there. It feels like you might get there. It feels very close. It always feels within a couple of millimeters, just out of reach. It's almost like, I often used to say, it's like looking for a key for a lock. You search for that key. Your whole life feels like you're looking for that key in your head, and then you realize the lock never even existed. And I think that's a key point in relation to that fear, is that you very easily get into this cycle that you spend your whole life going around thinking, oh, I'm just about to get there, I'll just keep going, I know that will bring relief, and the brain's sort of pulling you along, making it feel like you're just about to reach that thing, and then you never reach it because it doesn't exist. And I think that's so crucial, because I wasted so many years in that bloody cycle going around thinking, oh, I'm just nearly there, only a little bit further, and so on, and I was never there at all. And I think it's so important, because people do it. People spend their whole life, I get hundreds and hundreds of messages a day along the themes of, am I actually gay? Am I in love with my partner? Did I do a certain crime in the past? And they spend their whole life looking for if that's the case. And like that tweet said, you could keep doing that for the rest of your life. You're never ever going to find that answer, because that is not a path to recovery. Path to recovery comes from learning to accept yourself unconditionally, regardless of what you've done or think you are. And that is what's involved in that process. Is first, massively, you have to get over the idea of you are, where you think that you are an act is your whole entirety. So breaking that down, which is very, very apparent in the first two books by Albert Ellis, the founder of CBT, on my reading list, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything, and The Myth of Self-Esteem. They really help break down that to demonstrate, particularly in The Myth of Self-Esteem, in chapter 4, Psychotherapy and the Value of a Human, where it talks about how the self is an ever-changing process. It can't be rated. It's a highly complex process. We think the self sort of is anything we do. So if we're good at football, we think, I'm a good footballer. It's not. You're a human who happens to have a trait that helps them at playing football. And it's looking at that and breaking that down. Very important, especially with a lot of the guilt and harm related OCDs. In relation to all OCD, what you're looking at is you've got to give up this struggle, this endless fighting chase, where you're constantly trying to get somewhere, you're constantly trying to fix something or have an answer for something. You don't need that. And that chase can also become apparent with unconditional self-acceptance too, although it is often needed to release, to get under, well, not often, well, often is in a huge amount of cases, it's needed to get under. I wouldn't have been able to shut off that chronic guilt without a good understanding of how that operated, because I would just keep beating myself up endlessly in this. What happens with the harm OCD cycle is you get a sort of endless torture cycle where the individual is so concerned with such and such act they may have done in the past that they feel that they should be constantly tortured internally in the head over and over and over, never let off the hook. And so until I saw that there was no need to constantly punish myself, endlessly ongoing, forever and ever and ever, then I realised, that makes sense, that actually that's not the way to go, and that's not the way I'm going to get better. But those are all stages of awareness. Along the journey, I was very much, for a long time, I thought that, for a very long time in the journey, I wasn't even aware that I had OCD, so obviously that makes the cycle really difficult. I wasn't really aware of, I wasn't then aware of what I was doing in terms of the internal compulsions. Now, internal compulsions aren't something that you can just easily shut off in 2 seconds. You have to bring the fear down. When the fear comes down, then the internal compulsions come down. But the internal compulsions are kind of automatic. They just keep happening when you're terrified of something. It's like a protective mechanism where you've got into a habit of constantly checking, am I okay? Am I okay? Let me just look into that a bit more in the past. If I look to that more in the past, then I can let myself off the hook whilst I'm looking in the past, because I'm sort of going through an action. So it's sort of the anti of that torture cycle that's going on. And that torture cycle loop doesn't shut off till you have become more, either you're engaging in the compulsion, where sometimes it obviously doesn't shut off, where you're so guilty it makes you feel, overrides everything. But often it shuts down a bit when you're in that rumination cycle, hence why you've got into a habit of it. But then it will only really come down once you've either created a separation between it and you, which is where you're fused to it, like in a fused-like state to it. Then it will come down. That it comes through distancing yourself with the OCD, so that you can get some gap there. So that's something that takes a while to do, and it's very difficult to get that gap between how you're in that sort of fused-like state to it without a deeper level of acceptance, because it tends to stay locked in, like, no, you've done something. So the deeper level of acceptance really helps oil the cogs to that sort of separation from that fused-like state to OCD, which I think is a really important point to mention. OCD is, you're obviously working on changing the beliefs that are what's getting you better by breaking down these irrational beliefs. But what it is first you start sort of thinking yourself better with this pattern that gets you along the sort of thinking process. But then what happens is you end up then start to feeling yourself better in a way, because what you're doing is you're bit by bit breaking down that cycle so that it's just releasing bit by bit. And that's so important to the OCD recovery sort of pattern that's going on in your head. It's very, very easy to get into that cycle and stay stuck in that process. It becomes like a habit that's in your head, that rumination. And then people get extra frustrated. Why can't I just stop these internal compulsions? It's not as simple as that. You could stop all, a lot of the compulsions, people, they do need to obviously be brought down, all compulsions, reassurance and so on. But what tends to be fueling it more than ever is the fear. And so you could have stopped all the compulsion, you could have a few compulsions still going in a bit of reassurance and not be better because of things that you still very much fear. And that's something that's hugely not covered by so many people that do not understand OCD. They often say things like, oh, cut out all the ruminations, compulsions, and do an exposure every day, and do this at this time, and exposure at that time. That's not going to work. If a person's still scared, they'd be doing exposure all day long. You need to get into why they are scared. And you're not going to be able to just do that by exposing, because what actually happens is you get to a point where you've exposed. You don't feel scared in relation to those threats, they've gone down. But in terms of your belief system, you've still got things like, oh, I'm a terrible person if I did that, so it just flares it back up again. So we have to have a good understanding of the different components that are involved in recovery, because otherwise the cycle is just keeping going. All right, guys, let me just have a look and see if there's any quick questions. I had quite a few questions on Instagram stories yesterday, but I'll just have a look and see if there's anything that I think is important to cover today. I don't know why after I switch fears. How do I stop creating a new fear cycle? Well, you'll naturally create a new fear cycle all the time, because that's how OCD works. It just keeps morphing. So it's going to do that. So you need to just welcome that in and see that as part of the process. How to accept the fear if OCD infused. That's all to do with anxiety about anxiety, scared of being scared. So it's very, very important to get comfortable with feeling scared and being scared into the future, making peace with that, wearing that like an uncomfortable coat. But there's a few different ways that we come at that to get under that, because fear of fear is a very common part of the cycle. Okay, I think that covers all of the things that I wanted to cover on this topic today. I'll see you on here again soon, and I'll keep covering the different OCD topics on here, trying to go into the individual themes a lot more as well, because I know people want to see me cover those, and I will be doing that in the next week or so. All right, guys, see you later.